Good afternoon. Would you like to try a free sample of our double fudge brownie?
Oh, sure. That's very good. I'll just take one more, just to be sure. Yep, still very good.
Some things never change, like never being able to take just one free sample. And Geico saving folks lots of money on their car insurance.
Is that macadamia nut I taste? Let me take one more.
Sir?
Yeah, I thought so.
15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
Every gambler knows that the secret to surviving.
I don't wanna take advice from fools.
You always won every time you placed a bet.
Money, that's what I want.
I'm Joe Duffy, CEO of OffshoreInsiders.com. I'm going to do a betting preview on this report of the SEC Eastern Division. Now remember, what makes this different than other previews, we're not worried about who's finishing in first or second, last place. We're worried about how teams are going to do relative to their perception, both against the spread and as far as the over-under is concerned. Joe Duffy's Picks has an early bird special up right now. You've got this. You want to order this before the preseason begins. Joe Duffy's Picks. You can get every single football play, college and pro, preseason through the Super Bowl for just $1,499. You will not get a better price than that. Joe Duffy's Picks exclusively at OffshoreInsiders.com. First of all, from Tennessee. Look, they are everybody's chic team this year. There's no question Butch Davis has done a great building block, but they now face the burden of high expectations for the first time. They're no longer able to sneak up on teams. Quarterback Joshua Dobbs is probably the poster child of going from the hunter to the hunted. Remember, he was a third-string quarterback, and then he rose to a future star. Can he continue that momentum? It is very difficult for overachieving players to continue that into the next year and overachieving teams. I think Tennessee is going to have a little bit tougher ride than a lot of people expect. They're not going to sneak up on anyone, yes. I understand why a lot of people think that they could be the surprise team, and they are everyone's dark horse team. They do have 17 starters back from a 7-6 team. They do think the experience will improve their offensive line. Their defense could be among the best in the conference. Defensive backs are outstanding. But because they're everyone's chic dark horse, I actually think that in big games, they're going to come up a little bit short. Of course, we make the week-to-week adjustments, but I'm just telling you what my early season notes are. Now, Georgia, we've seen this movie before. Georgia's considered to be a major national contender. Then they'll look like it in certain games. They'll obliterate teams. And then they always find a way to lose a big game. Look for the Bulldogs to be very run-oriented with Nick Chubb, one of the best running backs in the country. Remember, this guy rushed for 1,547 yards despite being a backup running back for the first 5 games behind Todd Gurley. Now, Keith Marshall, he's one of these guys, if he can ever remain healthy. Georgia, they've really been hurt by injuries to skill position players in the past few years. So in defense of Mark Richt, who a lot of people don't think that he is a big game coach, he has really had his share of injuries. If he can ever stay healthy, and especially if Georgia's running backs, they go 3 deep at running back, 3 guys who could theoretically be all-conference performers. They could have a great deep running game. They have 4 starters back on the offensive line. Now, Malcolm Mitchell, can he be healthy? Talk about injury plagued. Wide receiver, stud wide receiver, but a guy who cannot remain healthy. For the first time in a long, long time at the University of Georgia, they will enter the season with no true proven quarterback. And I really do think that Georgia's going to be much more run-oriented. Also remember, new defensive coordinator Jeremy Pruitt had a lot of success last year, turned the defense around. That was Georgia's Achilles heel over the past few years. So between the fact that they have what many people believe is one of the best defensive coordinators in the country, and they're going to be much more run-oriented, wouldn't be surprised to see Georgia as a pretty good underplay, especially earlier in the year. And maybe if they really can get their quarterback, because they do have some talent at quarterback, and they said if Mitchell can remain healthy, they don't really have a proven number 2 wide receiver, but again, Rick knows how to recruit. I think as they establish themselves, they could start out as a big under team and maybe start to become a little bit of an over team as the year goes on. Look, Florida, Will Muschamp, he was a second coming of Ron Zook, had that defense wins philosophy. Remember what we always say, if you want to win with defense, you better have a great offense. And like Ron Zook, Will Muschamp, he's a spectacular defense, doesn't win in the SEC if you can't move the ball and you have a terrible offense. So Florida, addition by subtraction. Muschamp, a great defensive mind, not a very good coach. They're weak, though, and thin on the offensive line. Their talent is great on defense. The ghost of Muschamp will still be there. They're very strong in the secondary. They do have some holes in the front seven. So you got to keep in mind, certain teams, they like to go with their own strength. Other teams like to attack weakness. I think teams that have the ability to attack Florida's weakness on the front seven will have some success. It's going to be kind of tough to get a handle on where the over-under is, but I think the coaching upgrade enough, even though Florida appears to not have a ton of talent on the offensive side, their talent still is on the defensive side. The coaching improvement means that Florida is going to be a surprise on offense, and I do think the Gators are going to return to form. They will likely be a pretty good spread team this year. Missouri, they were the surprise of the conference each of the last 2 years. In some respects, they kind of had that advantage going to the SEC, which was steeped in tradition, kind of being a one-way rival, where a lot of teams couldn't just build up that intensity against Missouri the way Missouri could against the rest of the conference. It was almost like Missouri was playing a conference game and their opponents were playing a non-conference game. But I think that Missouri, there's enormous success and shocking success they had the last 2 years. Going to use that term again. They are finally going to go from the hunter to the hunted. I think a lot of people thought 2 years ago was a fluke. I'll admit, I'm wrong. I'm right a lot more than I am wrong, but I was wrong about them. But I do think yet again, I'm going to say, just like I said last year and this year, it is going to be right. Missouri will be a pretty good go against, but let's not kid ourselves. Gary Pinkel, one of the premier underrated coaches in the country, has proven people wrong, but I do think Missouri, general rule of thumb, going to be a pretty good go against. South Carolina, they lost Dylan Thompson, all-time single-season passing leader. Many question marks on the offensive side, though. John Hogue was brought in to improve a defense, was a disaster last year. Look, South Carolina, just the opposite of Missouri. South Carolina was a big disappointment last year. I think because South Carolina was a big disappointment, they are going to rebound. We expect a little regression to the mean. Remember, as we always say, by definition, regression can mean progression. So I do think South Carolina will be a pleasant surprise spread-wise. Probably, though, more of an under team. Their defense, I think, will definitely improve with some of the coaching changes with Hoke, and their defense really was the biggest underachieving unit, one of the bigger underachieving units in the entire conference. I do think South Carolina, again, just based on the fact that they were not as bad as they showed last year on defense, they will be improved on the defensive side. Kentucky, new offensive coordinator Shannon Dawson is a student of the air raid offense. He's got 2 quality quarterbacks to choose from, 4 starters back on the offensive line. Boone Williams, a 1,000-yard rusher. They go 5 deep with some guys who can contribute at wide receiver. This could be a breakout year for Kentucky. Don't think they quite have the depth. I look for Kentucky to get off to a very good start, but they're going to be one of those teams, we see it, especially. Keep an eye on how hot it's going to be late in the year. We have found out that teams like Kentucky that have pretty good frontline talent, but not a lot of depth, especially in the heat of the Southeast, that they tend to wear down. I think Kentucky will start out as a good spread team, probably finish as a bad spread team unless it's a mild season. But do not underestimate the cumulative effect that playing in the SEC sometimes and the heat and humidity can have on a team like Kentucky. And then what happens? They actually recover for the bowls where they enjoy the time off. But we'll talk about the bowls in a couple months. Don't want to get that far ahead of ourselves. Vanderbilt, offensive line, disappointed last year, but they got 4 returning starters. They should improve. Running back Ralph Webb rushed for 912 yards as a freshman. Got a little behind him. I'm just telling you, if Webb is banged up, they lose him, Vanderbilt's going to be in serious trouble. Wide receivers are young but talented. I think they'll be an early under team. The totals will probably drop a little bit just as their passing game and really more accurately the receiving game improves. Maybe start out as an under team and then become an over team as the year goes on. The defensive line is really the strength of their team. Vanderbilt kind of a poor man's Florida, where they're going to really try to stay competitive with defense. They just don't really have quite enough offense to stay in games, and I do think that they could be one of those teams. If you're in the live betting, maybe Vanderbilt will do well in first halves, but I just don't think they can hold on. And I think if you got some live betting and Vanderbilt looks like they're covering by a mile, maybe go with the superior team when they're playing the elite of the SEC in the live betting. You can probably get a good number. Secondary, though, keep in mind they're vulnerable, and I don't know if Vanderbilt's going to be protecting that many leads this year. But again, if Vanderbilt is in the lead with that vulnerable secondary, I think if their opponent has a pretty good passing game, they could be a team to fade on the live line, just as Vanderbilt might be looking like a good bet would be the time to go against them in live lines. Again, Joe Duffy's picks, whether you want to get it on a weekly basis, a monthly basis, or you can get the early bird special. Great bargain. Look, some of you don't know who I am. I know, I assume that most people do. I've been in this business since 1988, full-time on the score phones. Been doing this full-time for a long, long time. I win. I live and breathe this. Top football handicapper in the business. I will win for you. A lot of you have already won for you for years, but those of you who are new to offshoreinsiders.com, welcome aboard. It is the place to go. www.offshoreinsiders.com.
Call 1-888-FARMERS to switch, and you could save an average of $470 on your auto insurance. That's a lot of money in just a few minutes. With savings like that, you could be lounging on an impractical amount of ornate and overpriced throw pillows you bought for your couch. But you won't, because you're better with money than that. That's why you're calling us in the first place. Call 1-888-FARMERS to get a quote today.
We are farmers. Bum, 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 bum.
Based on average nationwide annual savings survey data July to December 2020. Underwritten by Farmers Trucker Fire Insurance Exchanges or affiliate. Products not available in every state.